I'm back and we're ready to spray the initial primer coats on this front fender. Now I know what some of you may be thinking, well Kent, why are you using spray can primer? Why aren't you using a spray gun with the two-part urethane high build primers? Well, on a large part I have to go back to the original intent of this video series. It is not for the professional body men. It's not to demonstrate professional body man techniques. It's to kind of show you how you can do some small dent repair at home without having to buy a lot of equipment. You know, for one thing, most body shops would not even fix this dent. They wouldn't do it. They would just replace the fender because of the high labor costs. And if a professional body man were to do this dent, other than some initial hammering and dollying, he would do everything with power tools, power air sanders, you know, power wet sanders, power everything. And you know, I have all those tools, but I didn't want to bring them out and show them. That wasn't the intent of this particular introductory video series. So I know there's a lot more techniques, there's a lot more that could be covered in this whole subject of body work, but it's not going to be covered here. I'm not going to cover painting. Painting is a whole other subject. You know, I'm just going to briefly go over some of the key steps to priming and prepping. You can take it to an auto body shop and they can paint it for you. If you don't care about color match or the quality of the paint, you can get some rattle can paint from you know, the local auto parts store and see how close you can get it to match. Well, you know, there's so many variables when it comes to paint, and that's not even going to be covered in this series. So I just wanted to say that, so if you're watching the series and you see it coming to an end, because it is coming to an end, I don't want you to think, well, Kent, you didn't cover this, and you know, other people do it this way, and this is the way the pros do it, and so on and so forth. No. Once again, I'm gearing this for the guy trying to fix a few dents at home in his own garage or outside the garage, which is what I prefer. So back to the spray can paint. A lot of what I've done right up to this point has been done because I know I'm going to use spray can paint. For one thing, I spent a lot of extra time sanding and blocking this. It has all been blocked and sanded with 220. And I've got, you know, I've guide coated it, I've got all this, almost all the sand scratch swelling out. Once again, if you're using two-part high build urethane primer in a gun, you can leave a lot of little flaws in here and you can come in and just dump that primer on and let it harden and block that out. It's a great time saver, and that's what I would do, although I'm getting so I really don't like to be around that two-part primer as I age. You know, you need fresh air mask, you need special equipment. You know, this little face mask here, right here, is not adequate. It's not adequate if you're spraying some of those two-part paints and primers. So, and even this, you know, even this single stage, you know, spray can primer, I'm going to have my mask on, and I'm going to have the fan filter running too here, and I won't be talking to you, I'll just kind of demonstrate how I'm going to do this. So this is not your normal hardware store primer. This is $20 for a can. I'm not going to tout any one brand, okay? There's 2 or 3 out there. You need to go to an auto body specialty paint supply store. If you don't have one locally, you may have to, you know, do some search and buy this primer online, but you won't find it for $5 or $6 a can. If you do, it's not going to be good enough, especially if you're spraying it with, you know, a urethane base coat, clear coat when you're all done. You need a quality primer. So this doesn't build as much. So that means I've got to, so what I do is I put this on in 2 stages. I don't just come in here and spray like 4 or 5 coats on here, because if I have a flaw, all I'm doing is putting a lot of excess primer on the good area, trying to fill the deep scratches or the pinholes. So what I do is I do a rough prime phase, similar to what I did with a rough filler phase. First I'm going to move the paper back a little bit. I'm going to move my mask line back about 1 inch. I'm going to scuff that area, and I'm going to shoot 2 good wet coats of primer over this area. And then I'm going to bring in the heat lamp here and let it dry, and then I'm going to guide coat that again. Okay, I'll use the black guide coat again. I'll spray a light coat of guide coat, and then I'm going to block dry sand it with 320. Once again, you can see I'm gradually moving up to a finer and finer grit of sandpaper, so that I can block that in, and it's kind of a final check. If everything comes out, I'll put 2 or 3 more coats in, and then I'll come in and wet sand it, block wet sand it with 400 wet or dry sandpaper and water as a final preparation for paint. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, this is already warm. It's about 70 degrees, so I've let this warm up by the heater. I'm going to bring the heat lamp in here, warm the fender to about 70 to 80 degrees. Then I'm going to get my mask on, and when I come back, I'll show you how we're going to shoot the initial 2 coats of primer on this front fender. You can see I've moved that mask line back, and this was right here is where the original, I guess you'd call rough sanding line stopped. Now you can see how nice it is to protect your original paint from when you're blocking with coarse sandpaper. I don't have to worry about a lot of sand scratches out in this area, but I will be feathering the primer. I'm not going to go all the way to the mask line. I'm just feathering the primer past this line where I had done most of that blocking with the 220 dry sandpaper. Okay, now I've got my fan here. I'm going to move it in a little closer with my filter, and I've shake this primer up for at least a minute or more. Okay, now I'm going to put the mask on. And before I put the mask on, I'll just explain what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in with a really light mist coat, and then I'm going to come, just let that tack off a little bit, and then I'll come in with a fairly wet coat, first coat. And then I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to let that flash off and dry for about 5 minutes. Then I'll come back in and put the second coat on, and after that bring the heat lamp in and let that dry for about an hour. So you can't hear me talking when I get this mask on. Okay, final shakedown. Come over here and make sure it's spraying properly. Okay, I'm going to start on the edge. I'm going to tip my mask back a little bit so you can hear me talking. I've let this flash off, and by that I mean there's no more shiny spots. It's not totally dry hard yet, but it's not sticking to my fingers, and notice all the shine to the primer has flashed off or dried off. So now I'm ready for the second coat, and I'll put that on fairly wet, not too wet, but fairly wet. I don't want it to run. And then I'm going to bring the heat lamp in, and we'll let that dry for about an hour with the heat lamp before I put the guide coat on.